1, 2, 3, 4.
Welcome to episode 30 of Scuba Confidential. Hello everyone. Hello Louise.
Hello.
And also on this episode we've got a guest we found lurking around outside the dive centre. It's Jim. Hello Jim.
Hello Marcus. Hello Louise.
Hello.
Hello listeners.
Hello. So Louise, I think everyone knows by now. Jim, you came in on a previous episode. I think it was episode 16. Sunfish, Moonfish, IDC. You talked about your instructor experiences, but for people who haven't come across you before, who are you?
Who am I? Good question. Yeah, I'm one of the instructors. Worked a bit with, obviously, Marcus. Worked with you before on various courses and things while I was a dive master and moved through the ranks. Became an instructor this time last year. In fact, almost to the day this time last year.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Should we be celebrating?
Cake?
He's obviously a hardcore listener.
And yeah, so this year I've been doing some instructor courses, some open water courses, and some a rescue course that myself and you did back in May, I think it was.
Yeah.
And since then I've had to have a little bit of a break through health reasons, various issues. How long have we got? But yeah, I've recently come back and really enjoyed doing a scuba review, a reactivate with a young lady called Iona. Mm-hmm. Really great, and it was just nice to get back into that kind of groove again, and start instructing, putting some more of the, those procedures and bits and pieces back into practice. So yeah, that was really good, and got a nice email from her as well, telling me how fantastic I was, so that's always nice.
That's nice.
Well,
after a bit of a break.
We know you're fantastic, Jim.
Well, thank you.
And knowing you were super prepped for it as well after a break. You probably went through your notes about 15 times for the Scuba review and the Reactivate program.
Yeah, of course, yeah. I sat there for a good couple of hours going through every single little thing I had to do to make sure I got it right and got it spot on. Yeah. And obviously it paid dividends.
Yeah. Before we go any further, I just thought it'd be worth mentioning a couple of things. Firstly, apologies to all our regular listeners for the hiatus that we've had. We've been away for a few weeks now. It was just due to a few reasons which we've put out a statement on social media that sort of explains that. I think we don't need to really go into too much detail on that. But needless to say, things are going to be changing. Early in 2020, in January, we're going to return in a new guise with new guests and fresh new look. So stick around with us. Don't unsubscribe. Stick with us. We will return. But this particular episode, episode 30, sadly, will be the last episode that we record in this particular guise with myself.
As we know it.
Yeah, this is the end of Scuba Confidential as we know it, if you like. No. It's also the Christmas episode, I suppose. So we'd like to just take this opportunity to wish everyone who's listening a very Merry Christmas and best wishes for 2020 while we've got this platform to do it. It's been a really excellent year for Louise and I, and we appreciate all the support and all the people who've downloaded and subscribed. And we've had emails from America and Australia and various parts of the globe with support. And even as we posted on social media, some really nice words from people as we explain the current situation. So stick around with us.
No, I'd just like to kind of echo your sentiments, really. So, yeah, everyone's support has been really appreciated, and it's really nice to know that we're going to sound a bit pretentious, but we're helping to make a difference to people's scuba diving experiences and their scuba journeys. J word. But no, in all seriousness, it's nice to know that people have got our backs and that, yeah, people are tuning in and getting a lot out of the podcast. It's really nice.
Yeah, it's very, very nice to know, very nice to hear. That's enough of the schmaltzy bit. I think we'll move on now, shall we? Okay, so on this particular episode, we're obviously going to talk about what we've been up to as we head up towards Christmas. Jim's just given us a little chat about what he's been up to. Lou's got some news of how hi-fi speakers and the right tunes can help the environment. And she's also got some news about the incredible hearts of blue whales. The subject, the kind of main meat of the topic this week will be revolving around dry suits as we're in the centre of winter and how you can keep yourself diving throughout the winter months if you happen to be in a colder climate. And if we've got time, we're going to pit our special surprise guest Jim against Louise in a quiz on diving safety myths. We'll see how we're doing for time. We may keep that one up our sleeve. We'll see how it pans out as we record this at the studio here. So, Jim, we've talked about your Reactivate. I wanted to just talk very briefly about what I've been up to. In the last couple of days, I signed off a young lad called George as dive master. He's 18 and he's really grown into the role of dive master over the last few months. There's a lot of responsibility, particularly when you're that age, without sounding sort of patronising or like an old duffer. When at 18, some of the responsibility you take as a dive master is quite significant, and I think he's really grown into it. He's thrown himself at it. He's listened when he's stumbled, and he's sort of won the hearts and minds of a lot of the people he's been working with and being coached by. So congratulations, George, if you're out there listening to this. The other bit of news was that Claire, who we spoke about on a previous episode, who also qualified as a dive master with me a few months ago, actually left the UK and went to Australia. She's been based on the East Coast there, and has subsequently thrown herself into her professional career out there, and has recently, in the last few days, completed her instructor exams and is now a fully fledged scuba instructor. So again, she's really shown commitment and worked really hard towards that. So I'm full of admiration for her for doing it. The three of us sat around the table here with the microphones. We've all jumped through various hoops to become professionals too. We know what it takes to get there, and hats off to you. Well done, both of you. Moving on, we're gonna go to Louise with the news.
A scientific study has revealed that acoustic enrichment could prove a valuable tool in repairing damaged coral reefs. Researchers from Exeter and Bristol University in the UK and the James Cook University and Australian Institute of Marine Science, that's a mouthful, isn't it? Yeah. Claim playing the sounds of healthy coral reefs amongst dying ones can actually counteract degradation. Interesting stuff. So basically, over the course of a 6-week study, audio recordings made on healthy reefs on underwater loudspeakers were nestled in patches of dead coral on Australia's Great Barrier Reef, and the findings found that twice as many fish were attracted to and actually remained in the healthy sounding dead coral areas than to those left silent, and the number of species attracted also increased by 50%.
Wow,
which is pretty cool, isn't it?
Pretty cool.
The lead author of the experiment, Tim Gordon of the University of Exeter, said that boosting fish populations in this way could help to kickstart natural recovery processes, counteracting the damage that we're seeing on many coral reefs around the world. So I think this is quite a trailblazing study potentially, and a piece of research that I think will be carried forward by a lot of marine scientists to really try and improve a lot of coral reef areas that are being decimated for various reasons around the world.
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting story, and the headline caught my eye with this one about golden oldies pulling in fish. When I saw this in the diving press, I was like, what?
You can relate to that, can't you?
Yeah, steady on. I just had this image of someone dropping this loudspeaker down and playing old Elvis records to various...
An old gramophone wind-up thing.
Wind-up gramophone on there. But, it's interesting stuff. It's interesting that the wildlife is responding to these sounds. And we know from our previous conversations with Samantha Howlett on episode 8, when she was talking about marine science in Moorea, that there is this symbiotic relationship between the fish life and the coral, and if the sound of healthy coral is drawing the fish in to clean the coral, and there are obviously species like parrotfish that are effective at that, that's going to then help the coral to then find its feet and perhaps grow again. So it's really good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really good. Anything you can do to sort of rejuvenate that coral, certainly with a Great Barrier Reef, because it's such a spectacle, isn't it? But, without sounding like a negative Nigel, how would you kind of upscale that? I mean, the Barrier Reef is like 350,000 square kilometres.
Yeah, that's a lot of those speakers, isn't
well, it is. So half of that is sort of bleached or dead or whatever. So how many speakers are you going to need to kind of bring that and rejuvenate that, and for how long? So although it's great and it's a great study, isn't it? And anything we can do to make that better is going to be worthwhile, and any studies they do. But you kind of, that's the biggest extreme there, the Barrier Reef, really, isn't it? There's lots of smaller ones, but if you were going to do that, oh my God, how long is it? How many speakers are you going to just go to your local
it's got to be effective,
music
isn't it?
retailer and can I have 175,000 speakers? So, but yeah, I mean, it's great, really.
I think it's still early days, isn't it? So I think I think, like you say, the magnitude of not just the area that they did the study on, but also the actual problem is a global issue, isn't it?
No.
I think making something effective and sustainable is the next part of the jigsaw, isn't it? If you like,
because it is globally important as well.
Yeah, definitely. Right. Scientists from Stanford University and Scripps Institution of Oceanography at the University of California have found that blue whales' hearts are working at their limit at the moment. In a study where they tagged a blue whale with a variety of sensors using suction cups containing electrodes, they actually found that blue whales' hearts beat much faster than expected at the surface, and actually a lot slower whilst they're feeding at depth. And it's the first study that's been conducted of this kind in the wild. So there's been a lot of studies on whales in captivity, but this one's quite significant because they're on actual wild blue whales. Obviously, blue whales are the planet's largest creature, aren't they? So they're pretty impressive. So I imagine there's a few challenges for this particular study. But Jeremy Goldbogen, who led the actual study, said that the animals that are operating at physiological extremes can help us to understand biological limits to size. And it can also be susceptible to changes in their environment, so it could affect their food supply, such as, are they actually getting enough food in them? How does that affect their health? Does that affect their cardiac health, particularly with this study here? But it's been quite surprising, and I think a lot of the researchers are genuinely surprised as to findings come back with.
Yeah, when I read the figures in the findings in this report, it was the extremes that struck me, because at the highest heartbeat rate, it says within the report, 37 beats per minute. Now, given that a human at rest is about 60, 70 beats per minute, that's not a million miles away when you consider the size of a human heart, and that the heart of a blue whale is the size of a small car. So that's quite incredible. But the other extreme, when they're diving down at depth, 2 beats per minute, and that, I think it's called mammalian response, isn't it? When they go into cold water and they able to go through that apnea process. It's absolutely amazing at the other side of it. So I thought it was really interesting. And any information, as we spoke about on the last news story, any information that's out there about any given subject with regards to the aquatic world, information's power, isn't it? And it'll help us lead to other studies and other discoveries, and may help us to protect the species.
Yeah, I mean, I was pretty amazed by that as well. I mean, 2 beats per minute. It's like hibernation, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like other animals, animal kingdom, going into hibernation, and it's just amazing. So, a heart the size of a car, a small Mini, doing 2 beats a minute.
Yeah, the size of the heart is the thing.
Incredible, really.
I mean, if you're a Brit and you're our age group, and I'm sort of tarring us all with one brush here, but we can do what we want. It's our podcast, can't we? I remember as a youngster going to the Natural History Museum in London and walking into the particular room where they had the mock-up of the blue whale.
We must be a similar age.
And just having my mind blown by the sheer size of it. So to not only have this study, but how the logistics of going about it. I mean, like you casually pop up to a blue whale and pop electrodes on it to monitor its heart rate. I mean, this thing is about the length of about 4 buses. It's a huge, monstrous mammal. So just the logistics of it alone I find amazing, never mind the research that they found.
Well, apparently with the actual attaching the tags to the whale, the first attempt, they managed to attach the tag, and then were fortunate that it actually slid into a position near its left flipper, and then it could actually detect its heartbeat.
Oh, wow.
So
quite by chance, really.
Yeah. It obviously kind of slipped out of place.
You make it sound like they're applying those AED pads
Yeah.
when we're teaching EFR courses, you know.
But yeah, it's really impressive findings, and apparently they want to try it out now on humpback and minke whales as well. So it'd be great to get an overall picture of the whales community's kind of cardiac activity.
Fantastic stuff. Is that everything for the news, Lou?
That's the news.
Thanks very much for that. Okay, we're going to move on to the kind of main meat of what we were going to talk about today. As we talked about earlier, we're heading into winter. It's now December. It's very chilly outside, and if you're used to diving in warm water, if you're new to diving, you may see colder water or a colder environment as a barrier to diving, but it doesn't necessarily need to be that way. If you're really passionate about diving, you can still keep diving with the use of a dry suit. So we thought it'd be worth just briefly talking about dry suits for people who are perhaps listening in different parts of the world who aren't familiar with them, the steps you might need to take in order to get familiar with the dry suit and be safe in using it, the different types of dry suit, and any tips and sort of anecdotes that we might have about that. So I suppose one of the biggest, not bugbears, but one of the things that I find frustrating sometimes is people who speak to me and say, oh, I'd never dive in the UK, or I'd never dive in Canada, or I'd never dive in Central Europe because the water's cold. And to me, that seems like this really strange concept. It's a bit like saying, I'm never going to leave my house in winter, or I'm never going to go skiing because it's cold. And of course, if you're prepared for the conditions and you've got the right clothes, the right exposure protection for the conditions, then it's absolutely doable. Mm-hmm. And I'm sure the hills and mountains in the Alps are full of skiers at this time of year.
Yeah, I agree with you, and I think I love diving in a dry suit. Absolutely love it. But when you tell people about it, there's normally like sort of 3 questions, isn't there, that you get asked. What is it? Because they're used to a wetsuit. Mm-hmm. Does it keep you dry? And does it keep you warm? Mm-hmm. So that's exactly what you're then saying. You know, people go, "Oh, it's too cold. I can't do that. I'm not going to be warm." Or, well, they're an amazing piece of kit if you get the right one.
I totally agree. And I mean, I can't speak for you two. Perhaps you can give me a steer on this, but I passed my open water course in a dry suit, so that was really, aside from a few try dives abroad before I qualified, that was my first real experience of diving was in a dry suit. All my open water skills, all those fin pivots and hovers and all those things that the hoops you jump through as a new diver, for me, I completed them all in a dry suit, so it became sort of second nature to me to dive in one, and going to a wetsuit was more alien, if anything. Well, in terms of diving and going abroad and being in warmer water, I think dry suits are great. Have you got any? You've got something you scribbled down there, Jim, haven't you, about dry suits and how they originated?
Yeah, I've got a little bit of information here. Thanks for that, Marcus.
Consult your encyclopedia.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. No, I mean they did start a long, long time ago, a lot further back than you probably realise. Obviously, they're not like the dry suits of today, slightly different. But yeah, I mean, they sort of go back to the 18th century and sort of 1710s, really, when the first ones were.
Wow.
Or first one was invented.
Was that when you did your open water?
It was, yes, of course, yeah. Not in a dry suit. But yeah, they go back quite a way. It wasn't, like I say, it wasn't quite the same as our dry suits now. It's basically a big steel tube that looked like a U-bend, for want of a better word, with 2 sort of sleeves, watertight sleeves, and a hole in the front of it, a glass hole in the front of it. Wow. And you kind of pulled yourself along, and and sort of use it that way. You didn't have any legs like we do. Well, they still had legs.
They
but,
do.
it wasn't. The dry suit didn't have legs.
Okay, the people saw it, just so we're clear for our
Yeah,
listeners.
the people had legs, yeah.
Okay.
But, the guy who invented it actually went on to use it for salvage work and became really, really wealthy back in 1710. He found a wreck and on it was 3 tons of silver.
Oh, wow.
And and he actually sort of made a fortune, not just that one, on many others, and loads of Spanish Armada ones.
Cool.
So it dates back quite a while.
Wow, cool.
John Letheridge, I think his name was.
Check out Jim with all his information.
Yeah.
Look at that.
He's on it.
I mean, these days, dry suits, I mean, for me, always used in the UK, any water, essentially, that's colder than kind of about 65 Fahrenheit, about 20 degrees C is dry suit time for me. And I think they're brilliant inventions. For those who aren't familiar with them, essentially you dive in a bag of air. You're sealed at the wrists, you're sealed at the neck, you're zipped in, and there's an insulating layer of air between your body and the suit, which is also you can use for buoyancy adjustments in the water, and that's essentially how the dry suit functions. There's a valve on the chest, not exclusively on the chest, but generally in the majority of dry suits you'll find on the chest, a bit like the light on Iron Man's chest, where there's a valve there connected where you can add gas in there into your suit for insulation and for buoyancy purposes. And there's generally a dump valve somewhere on the shoulder or the cuff, usually on the left-hand side. It's usually buoyancy-related controls from the left-hand side for diving. Where you can make adjustments there as well. And once you get used to it, I think they're really, really good. In fact, I find it easier for me personally if someone asks me to hover, for example. I can't hover in a wetsuit, hopefully.
Are you sure?
But I find it easier in a dry suit.
Yeah.
I find the positioning in a dry suit a little bit easier. Yeah, I mean, when did you guys first use dry suits?
Yeah, I did my open water in a wetsuit.
Yeah. Where was that?
In the Med.
Yeah.
Yeah. I remember it vividly.
Do you?
I do.
For what reason do you remember it so vividly, Jim? Is it something you need to share with everybody here? Can you share it with the class?
Maybe another time. Maybe another time.
We've got a whole other episode here. Have we?
Yeah, I think so.
There's going to be 2 Christmas episodes before we wrap up this thing.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I'll save that for another time. But yeah, and so I sort of did my course out there, but then I came to the UK and I did my dry suit course here, and I haven't looked back. And even when I go diving abroad now, I'm always pushing my chest, even in my weight. I forget that because I've done that much diving in a dry suit. And it's bizarre the other way around. The guys that I dive with in Spain that I go to fairly regularly, they've never dived in a dry suit. And there's a master instructor there. You're a master instructor, so you've done a bit of diving. You know your stuff. He's the same. And he's told me he wouldn't have a clue and he'd be scared to dive in a dry suit because he doesn't know enough about it, which I find bizarre.
Yeah.
There are some differences to diving in dry suits, but it's not a million miles away. And people talk about dry suits sometimes in these hushed tones, and people, like you talked about your friend in Spain, who's obviously an experienced diver, has sort of anxiety about the thought of diving in a dry suit. But it's not tricky. It's just adapting your style a little bit. So the analogy I always use when I'm teaching students and we're getting to the stage where they're going to move into a dry suit from the pool environment is, okay, the same principles apply. It's just going to be a bit more consideration in terms of your buoyancy and your positioning and just thinking ahead a little bit. So it's like the difference between driving a small car like a small Mini and driving a truck, where the same you're still driving, the same rules of the road apply. You're just having to do things in a slightly different way and give more room for your braking, cornering, and this kind of thing.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you don't get just chucked straight into the open water in a dry suit, do you? We do the courses first, so you get into the pool and you get an orientation to get the feel of it and get used to it. We don't just chuck you straight into the 6 metres or 8 metres of water and off you go.
Exactly.
You're learning a new piece of kit, aren't you? You're learning how it works.
That's
You're
right.
wearing it. It's
But I do love mine.
Yeah. I mean, the 2 biggest agencies are PADI and SSI. in terms of the amount of dry suit training that goes on. I would suspect, I don't know the stats in front of me, I would think probably Nowie would be third, or CMAS. But with PADI and SSI, then of course there is, as you rightly said, Jim, there is a dry suit orientation. We always do a dry suit orientation where we'll get people in a confined water environment and get them to understand about how they function, understand how they need to position themselves so that they stay in a relatively smooth, flat profile and they don't have air trapped in their feet, and how to add and release gas and get out of trouble if they do find themselves in a position where their buoyancy has gone slightly awry, and they can then expel air from their suit safely rather than get carried away to the surface. So there are safeguards in place and there's training in place, and if you're considering dry suit diving, that would be your place to start. I wouldn't just go and buy a suit off eBay, throw yourself in and hope for the best, because it's probably not going to be a good day for you. Your best bet is to go to your local centre, find a Louise, a Jim, or me, and get a steer on it and have an orientation first and the training to go with it, rather than get yourself into trouble. But with dry suits, when you've mastered it, it then just opens the door to lots of other diving environments that you wouldn't otherwise get to see, and lots of other situations, and also the times of year. There is no, aside from obviously the water conditions, if it's choppy or windy or whatever, but in terms of temperature, there's no, unless the thing's frozen. But that aside, you can dive any time when you've got a dry suit, and you're perfectly warm in it, provided you've got the right protection in terms of gloves and hoods and various other bits and pieces. So we've got different types of dry suits. So looking at the training, of course, you have an orientation, and if you're going to do dry suit training, you would then, having had your orientation in confined water, move on to open water. You'd have the likes of me or Jim assessing you and just checking your skills. So you would go through various buoyancy exercises and safety exercises to make sure that you're okay and you're comfortable in a dry suit. You've got good control of your buoyancy, and you've got kind of a stable position in the water column. You can move around comfortably while you're down there. But then after that, you're sort of faced with a slight dilemma, in that the bad news is about dry suits, for all the good points about them, about keeping you warm and opening doors to different diving environments, they're not cheap. So you're then in a position where, do I buy one or do I rent one? And if I buy one, what do I go for? We've all got different experiences of this as well, I suspect. Jim, what's a dry suit?
Just touching on that, I mean, I got a tailor-made dry suit. Obviously, you've done a
natural
lot
one.
Well, no, I'm just a funny shape, I think, to be fair. But I think I wanted to invest in a decent dry suit for the teaching purposes, really, because it's a lot better to be comfortable, isn't it? But with the right dry suit, it is a big investment to start with, maybe, but long term, it's not. If you look after it. Duncan, who was on a previous episode, is about 150 years old and he's still using it. But no, seriously, I mean, they do last longer. Like a wetsuit, they could be 10 times as long as a wetsuit, as long as you look after it. And so if you spread that out over 15 years, your investment, that initial investment, sort of seems not so much in the end, but the comfort of having your own dry suit.
You're getting the most out of your purchase, aren't you?
Exactly.
And it does depend on how often you're going to use it. And like you say, if you're going to be teaching, you need to trust your kit. You need to know it's not going to leak, or you're not going to have any issues with it, because you can't afford to have any distractions or issues.
Yeah, and sometimes if I've been abroad, you have to hire one. It's not the same, is it? It doesn't fit you perfectly well, whereas mine sort of fits me like a glove. They don't fit you so well, so you're not as comfortable. You can't perform as well in it, if you like.
It becomes part of you, doesn't it?
Yeah,
I love my dry suit.
I
really
do. I do.
I feel so comfy in it.
Yeah. And the extra little bits that you get with it, because you can adapt them to suit you, can't you? Get extra things like pockets and zips in other areas and things. So yeah, I mean, I love mine, but it may be expensive, but it's so worth it. So worth it.
I think you two hit the nail on the head in that it depends on the amount of diving you're going to do and where you're going to do your diving. Because again, there's this misconception that the dry suits are only used if you're diving in the North Sea off the coast of the UK, or in Canada in a lake doing ice diving. But I've used my dry suit in Malta. I've used dry suits in Cyprus, in Mediterranean environments as well, because the temperature drops there just like it does in the UK as well, and it's not it's not a hardship to wear a dry suit. People see it as this sort of hindrance, but it's not like that at all. Once you get used to it and comfortable in it, I find it easier getting in and out of my dry suit than I would a full-length 5mm wetsuit.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really buy that kind of anti-dry suit feeling you get from some divers when they don't like to use them.
I think in a similar kind of respects, there's this, I don't know really, this one-upmanship of, what, you own a dry suit? Oh, man up, or, you're sissy, if it's... and I'll openly say, no, I like wearing my dry suit.
Exactly. I
don't care.
would wear mine in the Red Sea if I needed to, because it's, depending on the type you get as well, it's thinner than a traditional wetsuit, and like you said, Marcus, it's easy enough to get into with
bit of practice.
Yeah, exactly. Once you've mastered it, you're in, and it's off you go, and it's a lot quicker. Oh, I find it a lot quicker anyway.
I do, yeah.
So if you get into the stage where you're thinking you're going to take the plunge, and no pun intended, and invest in a dry suit, then there's several options historically, but generally these days you're looking at either neoprene or crushed neoprene, or the other side of the fence is sort of a membrane dry suit. Now, essentially, the differences between the two are that the neoprene suits are made of thicker neoprene and the same material as you would find in a wetsuit. So they are slightly more bulky, but they do have those thermal properties. They tend to be quite hard wearing, and they fit your body quite nicely. As Jim said, yours is a neoprene suit, isn't it, Jim?
It is, yeah.
And it does fit you like a glove. I've got a couple of dry suits, and one is an off the peg one. I'm a sort of relatively normal shape, so
Mr. Average.
Yeah, I'm Mr. Average, off the peg, men's L, that fits me. But I've also got one that was made for me, and that's quite a common thing with dry suits, where they be made to measure, or you can have them customised as well. So if you don't happen to be an off the peg size, don't let that put you off. In fact, this is an opportunity to have something made for you that is going to be bespoke to you, and you'll feel really, really comfortable in, as opposed to an off the peg wetsuit.
So Louise mentioned one-upmanship, so you've just done that, haven't you? I've got one dry suit, you've got two.
Louise has got three.
Well, I'm just interested in what you said about customising, so you can put like sequins and like...
well, Jim does.
Funny you should say that.
Have you not seen him diving around Sunny Cove with a feather boa on?
Only did that once.
Only on Saturdays.
Yeah. It's like Elton John going round.
It was the big sparkly glasses that did it.
Just feathers on the
Stoney.
shoulders, yeah.
Elton John.
Oh dear.
Christmas.
Oh dear.
Very good. But yeah, you coming back to where we were. you can customise them. Unlike wetsuits, most dry suit manufacturers will offer you a range of options. So you'll go in and say, I'd like this particular suit in this size. They're going to want your neck measurements, your wrist measurements, obviously the size of your feet. I say obviously, but for those who aren't familiar with dry suit, a big chunk of dry suits come with boots that your feet are enclosed within the suit, within a boot that forms part of the suit, unlike a wetsuit as well. So that's kind of made to your dimensions, but there are other aspects you can have as well added to your dry suit, whether it's cargo pockets on the side, different dump valves, different protections. You can change where the valves are. You can even, if you're a guy and you think you're going to be in and out of your suit quite regularly teaching, you can have P-zips put in your suit, which is just a zip across the crotch. So when you're out of the water, you don't have to get completely out of your suit to go to the toilet. You can just zip across and do it.
That's for men only, by the way. Just like to add.
That'd be interesting, wouldn't it?
Lou did try it. It didn't go well.
I don't have one.
So you can customise them how you want, and I agree totally with what you said, Jim. If you have a dry suit and you look after it, it will go on for years. It's much harder wearing, in my experience at least, than a wetsuit. The most expensive part of a dry suit really to replace is the zip. A lot of dry suits have zips across the shoulder blades that are brass and they're heavy duty. But as long as you keep the zip straight, you don't bend it, and you wax it regularly and clean it, then again, that can go on for several years before you run into problems with that.
Yeah, just mentioning the zip there, I was sort of doing a bit of investigation on dry suits, obviously, before we came in. Marcus gave me an hour to have a little think about it. But talking about the zips, they were actually first developed by NASA for spacesuits in the 1960s.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Cool.
which I thought was pretty cool. So the technology that we've got now on these dry suits sort of stems from then and from NASA.
Wow.
But it was BF Goodrich, I think, the tyre manufacturers. They come up with the watertight zip for the dry suits. And the first person to use it was in 1956, a man called Bev Morgan.
Wow.
Good old Bev.
Yeah, which I thought was rather quite interesting.
Yeah.
That is quite interesting, Jim.
QI.
So pros and cons of the different suits. The neoprene tends to be favoured for me, and I think you guys both have neoprene suits as well.
definitely, yeah.
The membrane suit is also, I would say, equally popular. It sort of depends on the kind of part of the world you're in, but the membrane suits are thinner.
I have had one of them.
Yeah, they're thinner, they're
And I
lighter.
Didn't get on with it.
Didn't get on with it.
No,
They
it's
tend
just
to
too
be
thin.
And they're
tend to be
quite
baggier,
rigid. Yeah.
sort of baggy, and like it's wearing a
So you
crunchy
need
bag.
more undergarments
Yeah,
when you wear, because they've got no insulation, have they? So you've got to wear more
Yeah.
thermal undergarments or underneath, which
yeah.
defeats the object to me.
A
But
little bit, yeah. I think they tend to give you a little bit more flexibility in terms of moving your arms and legs slightly, because obviously the material's thinner. But as you rightly said, Jim, the thermal properties aren't there quite as strongly. If you've got great undergarments, that's okay, I
But
suppose.
to be honest, you look at the technologies now, I don't know which suit you've got, but mine is really thin. Although it's neoprene, it's compressed neoprene, so it's really quite thin anyway. So I've got flexibility in movement, and some of the panels within it are only 1.1 mil thick. You're still getting insulation, but you've got that movement and flexibility. So it's not a lot of difference really.
You do yoga as well, don't you? So
I
very
do,
flexible.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing that up. I'm trying to be manly here. Yes, I do man yoga.
Shame.
No, I do, and I actually really like yoga, but it does help. And
And the listeners can't see this, but he sat here in the lotus position.
the downward dog.
Steady.
But yeah, I mean, now technology is the
Yeah.
tri-laminate suits or the membrane suits, which you've got there, are thin, but so are the neoprene ones now,
Yeah.
and they give you so much more.
I agree with you. When the time comes, that will be the choice you have to make if you're a consumer out there and you're thinking of going into to buy a dry suit. Just weigh up those pros and cons, and the main benefit, I would suppose, as technology improves with neoprene, is becoming less apparent, as you said, as crushed neoprene becomes more effective. But with the membrane suits being lighter, if you want to travel with them, it's a lot easier. If you want to then roll up your dry suit and it's a membrane suit and take it on a trip from the UK to Canada or Iceland or to dive in Sulphur or whatever it is, it makes life slightly easier than if you're wearing a neoprene suit.
What I would say is just if you're going to buy one, and do buy one, but just go and try them on in local dive centres rather than, like, say, on eBay or something like that. You really need to try them on to see which suits you, because you need to put on all the undergarments as well. You do it in the shop, don't you, and helping people with that. Well, until you try these on, you don't even, I mean, like the neoprene ones, there's various different neoprene ones, isn't there? Mm-hmm. So, like, mine's an 03 one. Well, they do 3-4 different types, and they're all very different compared to even the tri-laminate ones. So if you don't try them on, I mean, I tried the really thin one. I think it's the RI 1100, and to me it was too thin. Because I like to feel like I'm having that nice little warm hug under the water. But that was too thin for me. It gave you extreme flexibility and movement, but it just wasn't right for me. And I tried it on first and went for the 2100 in the end. So
I agree. It's always good to try before you buy. I've seen it countless times working at the centre. People have come in with an eBay purchase. Not that there's anything wrong with buying stuff off eBay, but it is a gamble. And this guy came in, I think he bought a dry suit online for about 20 quid, I think.
wow.
And he went through to the pool, and I could just hear so much swearing. And he was having no end of issues with it. The seals were splitting, it was leaking.
Oh yeah, because it's
wasn't
probably not
fitting
been
right.
serviced, has it?
Exactly.
So,
you don't know what you buy.
Mine's in for a service at the moment because it's a bit colder and the sort of season's finished, and whatever. So I've put it in for a service now, and that's what makes it last. And if you're buying something off somewhere like eBay and others, then
you're buying blind, aren't you?
Yeah, if it's not serviced and got that sort of safety certificate, if you like, against it, then you're asking for trouble, aren't you?
Absolutely.
I wouldn't do it. Don't do it.
Yeah, and I think you guys are right as well in that there's so many different options. The different constructions of neck and wrist seals, whether they're latex or neoprene, the different constructions of the suit itself, the torso of it, the variable thicknesses, the rear zip or front zip, different entry points, whether you have built-in boots or you have the kind of sock style ends to the suit, and then have what we call rock boots, which are kind of like walking boots you put over the top of your dry suit. There are so many variables. I think the best thing to do is have an honest look at the type of diving you do, how often you go diving, and then go to your local centre and get a steer from them on what they would recommend for the type of diving you're going to be doing in a dry suit. But having done that, it's going to open doors for you, I think.
It's also important to see how it fits with your existing kit as well. So does your BCD or wing sit right with it? How are you going to configure your gear? With the dry suit hose, obviously it goes underneath the arm, attaches to your first stage, and it's a lot of considerations that kind of that snowball effect. So once you purchase another piece of gear, it does affect how you have your setup and also affects your diving.
Yeah, I think that you're right with considerations with a dry suit. It's your gear, your other gear. If you used to, all your gear is based around a wetsuit, you might have a travel BCD or a lightweight BCD that you use in your nice tropical water. It might not have the lift capacity for bringing you up with your new dry suit. Or fins. I've got 2 sets of fins. They're the same make, same model, but I've had to go a size up from a dry suit compared to diving.
That's
with
a good point,
boots and a wetsuit. So your gear might change. So there are other considerations to have, but it's definitely still worth it.
Yeah. The only other thing I would say about dry suits to consider when you're buying one, we're just talking about the two things, kind of pros and cons of the different constructions, it just occurred to me, is that neoprene dry suits are very much made to your size and shape, whereas the membrane ones are that bit baggier. There's deliberately space in them for undergarments. So if you're the sort of person who tends to overindulge at Christmas, and your
he didn't even look at me then,
and your weight fluctuates, then you've got more room to manoeuvre in a membrane suit. If you've got a neoprene one that's made for you, and you suddenly manage to put on 30 or 40 pounds in weight, then you're going to struggle. And the neoprene is very much made for you at that moment you buy the suit, or it's fitted for you. So you have to then be more disciplined if you're going to make it last for those years. Otherwise, you may grow out of it, and not in a good way.
Well, you touched on there the undergarments, and we said earlier that is a really important. So don't go to the dive shop and just put on a dry suit. Put the undergarments on as well, because it's really important how you feel underneath as well, isn't it? And you can get various different types of undergarments. So it's about keeping warm. Even we go, don't we? In February is, I'm allowed back in the water in February, mid-February, it'll be about 3-4 degrees, I'm there. So, but, that it doesn't matter because I'll have the right undergarments on. So, but you need to try that.
And most dry suit manufacturers will have a good range of base layers as well to complement the suit. And
I do have another interesting fact. I'm full of it tonight.
Ooh. Steady on.
Did you know that alpaca socks are the warmest?
Wow.
Yeah.
Alpaca socks.
Yeah, so socks made out of alpaca will be the warmest ones, and that is a proven fact, apparently.
Oh, really?
I stick those on my Christmas list.
Yeah, ditto. Okay, good. So I think we're pretty much covered dry suits. Get the training, get the suit that's right for you. Make sure you're happy. You've got the options on it you want. Do try it on with professional advice and with the undergarments that you need to make the diving that you're going to be doing, and all's good. Dry suits will open doors for you and allow you to dive in lots of different environments rather than having your diving shut down for months in the winter if you happen to live somewhere where the environment is a little bit colder. So what we're going to do now is, as it's Christmas, we've got a little quiz.
This does make me nervous.
I know it makes you nervous.
It makes me nervous because my fledgling instructor career is now jeopardised over 5 questions that I may not be able to answer.
The force is strong in you, Jim.
Yeah,
I'm
but
sure
you've given us no warning. You haven't told me what the answers are.
That's sort of the
Or
idea
what the
of
questions
a quiz.
are.
Just so you know, it is the genuine article, and I haven't just made these questions up. I went to Divers Alert Network, so this was daneurope.org, and for those of you who don't know Divers Alert Network, they're a great organisation, do lots of research into diving. There's loads of advice available at their website and research, and if you've got a question particularly medically related to diving, whether it's ears or injuries or anything related to diving safety, these are your go-to guys to find out. And they had a diving safety and misconceptions quiz, which I found on their website. And I thought,
feel like I'm being set up. I do.
And I thought, wouldn't it be a great Christmas treat for Louise and for Jim to do this quiz?
I think we've actually got some more stuff to discuss about dry suits, to be fair.
I just got to be somewhere. I just realised.
You'll be fine. It's not like you're going to get your status taken away by the agency if you fluff some of these questions.
No, but it's the peer pressure that I'll get.
Got this rush of imposter syndrome.
Yeah, if I get anything wrong that's really simple, because of the pressure I'm under, I can see my phone going.
Well, there's 10 questions in this quiz, so essentially it's 5 each. The way I thought the only fair way I thought I'd split it was sort of question 1 for the first one of you, question 2, and just alternate them throughout this quiz, and we'll see how we do. There are no prizes for this other than for the kudos.
So why do it?
just for the sheer fun of it. I thought it might be really interesting.
Fun.
All right. I think we'll go ladies first.
Okay.
On this.
Give it to me.
So question 1 is for Louise. True or false? My dive computer factors my thermal status into my decompression sickness risk.
False.
I want that one.
That is correct, Louise. Obviously, computers measure the water temperature, but they're not account for other factors that affect your thermal status. Because just because the water temperature is X degrees, you could be wearing a shorty or you could be wearing a dry suit, as we discussed. So it's not going to take that into account.
Do I get the same question?
No, Jim. You get question 2. So question 2 is multi-choice. Are you ready, Jim? He's covering his face. He's looking. I haven't seen Jim look this stressed in some time.
I do. I feel nervous.
Beads of perspiration on his
Louise
brow.
is 1-0 up, and it's like,
This is like a penalty shootout,
I'm not
isn't it?
competitive at all.
Okay. So question 2. Symptoms of DCS, decompression sickness, typically occur within A, 12 hours of surfacing, B, 1 week of surfacing, C, 1 month of surfacing, or D, 1 year of surfacing. Would you like the options again?
No. So, is this multiple choice? Is it?
Yeah. So you've got A, B, C, or D. A is 12 hours.
I would
B
say
is 1
A,
week.
12 hours normally, but it can take longer. But I mean, it could be 1 hour, it could be 10 minutes, but up to 12 hours.
Is that your final answer? He's doubting
Louise isn't helping me. That is my final answer.
Okay, correct. Well done, Jim. 1-1. Symptoms of DCS typically occur within 12 hours of surfacing. DCS is less likely to be a cause if any new symptoms appear after 24 hours. If someone flies after diving, then that sort of changes things as well.
Right, yeah.
Question 3. This is for Louise. True or false? Decompression illness, DCI, is just a bubble disorder. True or false?
False.
You are correct in that it's false.
This is a setup.
Decompression illness obviously involves more than just bubbles. It's a cascading effect of physiological and biochemical events. And medical treatment often involves dealing with more than just the bubble effect of decompression sickness. So that is false. Jim. So we're at 2, is it 2-1?
2-1.
2-1 to
Louise
Louise.
looks really smug. That's not fair.
Look at him. He's stomping his feet like a child. Question 4 for Jim. If my dive buddy experiences symptoms of DCI, I should A. Monitor vitals and activate local emergency services. B. Contact Dan. C. Start emergency O2 first aid. D, go directly to the nearest chamber. E, answers A, B and C. Or F, answers B, C and D.
So to me, it's kind of a ambiguous question, that one. So what is so the first step you do is give them oxygen. That's the first step. Right. So, but as this is something to do with Dan, as you mentioned at the start, B has got to be in there as well. So I'm not going to just go for oxygen. I'm going to go for A, B and C. Which
is answer E, which is the correct answer.
Hey.
2-2.
I know my stuff.
Is that bead of sweat going down the side?
You haven't seen the other side.
Get this man a whiskey.
Exactly. So that is spot on. Obviously, you wouldn't go directly to the chamber. That may not be a necessity, but vital signs, O2, and advising Dan would be your steps for that. Question 5 is for Louise.
I feel sick.
Only a few more questions, Jim, and you can go home.
It's 2-2.
Right, 2-2. Question 5 for Louise. What measures can I take to help mitigate my risks of DCI DCS? It's got A, dive only when well rested, nourished and hydrated. B, avoid heavy exercise before, during and immediately after diving. C, stay fit for diving, adjust your diving according to your level of fitness. D, know when to call a dive and don't be afraid to do so. Or E, all of the above.
I'm going to go for E, all of the above.
No hesitation, straight in there.
She's got
back
easy
of the
questions
net.
though. This is just,
Fix.
it is a fix. That's what I am.
It's just the way the questions are falling,
Yeah.
Jim. This is
just
the
a load-
order.
Just the way you've written them.
This is the order they appeared on the website,
I'm
Jim.
just a lowly dive master. As
Exactly.
You're an
This is the
instructor, Jim,
problem. This is
All right. Okay. All right. So what is that? It's 3-2 now, isn't it? 3-2.
yeah, maybe.
Oh, this one actually it is. This could be interesting for Jim.
Oh no.
Question 6 for Jim. True or false? Feeling like you have to urinate underwater is due to increasing pressure of deeper water. True or false?
That's false.
Is it false?
Yeah.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Okay, it is false. It is false.
How could... yeah.
I'd have said false as well, yeah.
Okay.
He's trying to make me doubt myself, and I almost did.
I think you're feeling the need to urinate right now,
I
Jimmy.
am, yeah.
The increased need to urinate underwater is a phenomenon known as immersion diuresis, also known as the P phenomenon. Okay.
Thought long and hard about that, didn't I?
Yeah, exactly. So where are we at now? Is that 3-3?
3-3.
3-3, okay.
Did I not take the lead?
No.
Briefly.
You pulled level, Jim. Louise, question 7 of the 10 here. True or false, diving is good cardiovascular workout?
I would agree with that. True.
Sure?
Well, it's exercise of sorts, isn't it? And
Can
it's
I answer?
cardiovascular.
No, you can't, Jim. This is Louise's question. Is that your final answer?
Yeah.
Okay. The answer is false.
You're kidding.
While diving certainly has physical components, the act of diving itself does not provide cardiovascular exertion needed to increase and maintain general fitness.
Really?
Depends who's leading the dive, doesn't it, Marcus? To be fair, we've got to keep up with you.
Have you ever seen Louise swimming around like a torpedo? So yeah, obviously you try and avoid overexertion underwater and take it easy. You need fitness to go diving, and diving can form part of a healthy lifestyle, but
Do you think if
it's
we
not
just
a workout.
Yeah, I guess
got our
swimming.
buoyancy right and you
Yeah.
streamline, you're sitting in the water, aren't you? You're just finning a little bit.
So
You don't
swimming
really...
on its own is cardiovascular fitness.
I've
isn't it?
never
Or
seen
training.
Jim look as happy as when you just
I'm
flopped
going to
that.
take the lead if this is an easy question. The worm has turned.
Question 8 for Mr. Jim. True or false? Staying hydrated is not a surefire way to prevent decompression sickness. True or false? Staying hydrated is not a surefire way to prevent decompression sickness.
No, it's not.
So you're saying it's true that staying hydrated is not a surefire way.
Yeah, true. Because you need... there's so many other factors. Just being hydrated isn't the only factor in... It can't be.
It
Yeah.
can contribute. Can't
Yeah,
it?
you're absolutely right.
Yes, I've taken
Obviously,
the
there's
lead.
dehydration. Obviously, is one of the factors of it, but depth and time and all these other factors, your age, the fat content of your body, the temperature of the water, all those things play a part in it. But hydration, obviously, we always telling students stay hydrated, drink lots of water. avoid alcohol, this kind of thing. So, Lou, the pressure's on, because if you fluff this one,
The penalty
I'm out of my
shootout's
ear.
over.
he's got it. There's no way back. It's sort of hinging on this,
I've
really.
got it.
Number 9, Louise. Which of the following is true about sports drinks? A. Sports drinks will dehydrate you. B. You must dilute sports drinks. C. You should drink only a small amount of sports drinks when doing physical activities. Or D. None of the above. Do you want me to read? Always the same. Do you want me to read out?
What are the options?
Can I answer this one?
A. Sports drinks will dehydrate you. Is that true? B. You must dilute sports drinks. C. You should drink only a small amount of sports drinks when doing anything physical. Or D. None of the above.
I would say C.
You should drink only small amounts of sports drinks
Can I answer?
when doing physical activities.
I think so, because a lot of them have high sugar content and aspartame and things.
But they hydrate you. Sports drinks hydrate you, don't they?
With electrolytes.
That's what they've been made to do, is hydrate you, surely.
Yeah.
Well, you take a sports drink in the gym to hydrate you, don't you? Or after football, or...
I'm sticking with C.
I'd go with the last one.
So you should only drink small amounts of sports drinks when you're doing physical activities.
I think water is better.
I can see you thinking, but the correct answer is D, none of the above.
Stupid question.
So it's many sports drinks, as you rightly said, do contain high levels of sugar and are high in calories, but they are designed to keep a person hydrated and in electrolyte balance. When it comes to hydration, water is the best method. However, if you prefer the flavour of sports drinks, just make sure to keep an eye on your calorific intake. You know what this means, Jim?
I didn't get a point for that, did I?
No.
I
won.
failed to see what that's got to do with scuba diving myself. But
Well, hydration.
I didn't write the questions, Louise, I'm
bit
afraid.
tenuous, isn't it?
That means you've won regardless, but do you want to do this last
I
question
do want
anyway?
to do the last question,
Okay.
yes.
Okay.
I want
Well,
the
good.
End on a
full,
high.
clean sweep.
Okay. Now, given
Well,
some...
actually, this can be edited out, so if I get it wrong, I'll say no.
I think
we'll
this-
go back and I'll say, no, I don't want the last question.
I think this will be fairly obvious, given some of the swimming tests we've had with dive master candidates over the past periods. Okay, true or false? Only strong swimmers and exceptional athletes can be divers.
God. Oh, this is another 40 minutes conversation. No.
No, it is false. It is false. Obviously, you need to be physically and medically fit and have a certain comfort in the water. But, you know, none of us sat around this table are triathletes, although we do sort of do regular exercise in the gym, and you do your yoga and bits and pieces, don't you? So
I do.
there you go. So I'm afraid, Louise.
That,
I'm the
that
weakest link.
training that I had paid off.
I am the weakest link. Goodbye.
Yeah.
My instructor career is still intact.
Yes.
You can leave with your head held high.
So there you go.
Yes.
So, ladies and gentlemen, that is the end of our Christmas episode. It's also the final episode of Scuba Confidential. As we said earlier, we will return early in 2020, January. We're going to have new guests and new sounds and new everything. It's going to be a fresh new look and a new start in 2020. Personally, for myself, I'd just like to thank everyone who's downloaded it and made it far more successful and popular than I ever imagined when we first started sitting around a microphone over a year ago. And I wish you all well for Christmas and hope you'll stick with us, and we'll see you in 2020.
Likewise, yeah, it's been amazing. It's been an amazing journey. There you go, I got that word in again. But yeah, it's been absolutely just overwhelming, really, to know that so many people have got so much out of the podcast, enjoyed listening to us, rabbiting on. And yeah, echo your sentiments, really, Marcus. Have a great Christmas, everybody. And we're going to come back new, reinvigorated, new branding, new everything really in the new year. So it's going to be an exciting new chapter.
There you go. And Jim,
Merry Christmas.
yeah, thanks for coming in, Jim.
Happy New Year.
I'm glad we bumped into you. It's been nice to see you sweat doing the quiz.
Oh, I hated that.
And I think we'll wrap it up there. So until we hear from you again, see you again, however you want to put it, goodbye.
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 Thank you for listening to Scuba Confidential. We really appreciate you tuning in today. We'd like to clarify that we're in no way affiliated with any agency or organisation. all opinions expressed during this podcast are our own. If you'd like to follow us on social media, you can find us on Twitter at ScubaConfident1, Instagram and Facebook at Scuba Confidential, and if you'd like to support us via Patreon, go to patreon.com/Scuba Confidential. Any contribution is really appreciated. Additionally, if you have any suggestions for topics or discussions, just let us know at scubaconfidential@gmail.com. Many thanks to Plunkett Music for the groovy tunes, and we'll catch up next time. Until then, keep diving.